Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters, and welcome to our raw reaction review for Hell of a Summer. And yeah, Luke, we talked about this way back on the Sunday Scaries. I checked earlier today. I remember the day you told me that Finn Wolfhard, the Stranger Things kid, the Ghostbusters kid, stepping into the director's chair and he's doing a slasher movie. So that was pretty exciting. I went back, watched some of that, and we were definitely a bit more positive on it. We think it could be cool to see him branch out. How you feeling about Hell of a Summer after you've seen it?
I was excited for this one just because, Finn Wolfhard, part of Stranger Things, always tackling those 80s vibes. So when you look at something like Hell of a Summer and it's going to be tapping into a lot of the slashers we love, looking at something like Friday the 13th, The Burning, all those prominent slasher flicks that take place on a summer camp, I was like, he could be really being able to tap into that DNA and make something fun, at least give us something reminiscent of that. And I'll say, I think after this one didn't necessarily blow my mind in any sense, nothing overly memorable of this film, but I'll say hitting some of the points that we are looking for when we were looking at just going to summer camp and having the slasher roam around. It had some decent moments to it, nothing explosive or overly memorable, but I think it just kind of hits right in the middle of what you're looking for in these terms of this kind of subgenre.
Yeah, and I think like the trailers, I don't know necessarily if they're doing a proper job selling that. I kind of feel like they are leaning into more of the slasher elements. Like there's a whodunit, there's a slasher element to it, but I feel like it's again one of those movies like we talked about just a couple months ago where it was like I forget what it was exactly, but it's always it was Hard Eyes, where it's like comedy first. I think they balance it better here than Hard Eyes does for sure, but I think that like it's definitely more comedy and the horror is just kind of a flavor. It's very much more like a coming of age movie. I want to say like you kind of get a lot more of those tones and vibes than necessarily a core really faithful camp slasher.
Yes, I'll say going into this one and as you're watching it, one of my critiques of the film was the lack of tension, I guess, because we're going back to those comedic moments in this because it seems like that's a little more prominent than anything else in this film. And when you look at something like Friday the 13th, where Jason is stalking everybody, and you're always a little bit tense, not necessarily on edge, wondering when it's going to happen, but you know that that looming presence is always around, and it could happen at any moment. So you're always a little bit tense when you're watching scenes, even when Jason Voorhees doesn't pop up. Well, looking at this one, I felt like we kind of just solely focus on the comedic elements at times that you almost forget that there is a slasher in this and that you're really just focusing on some of that situational comedy that as I was watching this, I became a little bit more aware that it was overstaying its welcome at certain instances where it's not offensive comedy where it just doesn't work and it really falls flat. There are elements in here that do work, but then I feel like they just keep going and going when they maybe should have put a pin in that and then went somewhere else and maybe built some tension. And even when we're going into those scenes of our slasher stalking and, on the chase, I didn't really feel those tense elements because we always end up injecting some sort of comedic element into it and it kind of deflates some of the scene. So I never really feel fully tense when we're out of the slasher situation, even when we're in it.
Yeah, and I think like that is going to be more of a pure talking point for folks like us who are into like horror. Like we're here to see a camp slasher. We kind of want some more of that. I think that, the movie as it's presented in and of itself, I could see a lot of people having fun with it. It's a very, I guess you call it not paint by numbers, but I think like very safe coming of age comedy with a little bit of like the slasher element. I think like if they just would have maybe I don't know if they would have played into some of the tropes but like had a little bit more fun with it and actually like tried to not only have fun in the sense of making the comedy work more but actually bring in those tense elements that we remember from Friday the 13th, The Burning, you said all these movies, Madman. I think like if they could have tapped into that classic kind of vibe a little bit more, I think it might have hit a little bit better. Now we had a discussion before this because I was under the impression this movie was supposed to be taking place in the 80s when it was announced. We didn't talk about it in the Sunday Scaries thing, but for some reason I just always thought this was the 80s, and even up to then I like completely like blocked out the fact that there were phones in the movie at one point. So I just wonder if this movie would have been more like, if I would have liked it more had they actually set it in the 80s, put some of those obstacles into it, and actually had us dealing with a little bit something more faithful, if I would have enjoyed it more.
I think it could have been an interesting approach, but we get so many movies like that where they're, especially now in 2025, where we live through Stranger Things
Yeah.
and so many hyper 80s things that maybe that novelty has worn off. I did like that there are cell phones in this. They find a way to lose it. It's not overly creative or something, but at least they didn't insult intelligence to be like, well, we could just, call someone and get help. So
True.
I did put that as a plus in my notes, just to be like, okay, they did handle some care in here. And it does kind of maybe give you that element of timelessness, just because once we lose the cell phones, we're kind of just on this campground and we're just dealing with the issue itself. So, I think if it was in the 80s, it could have been a little more dynamic, and depending on the approach, where it's like if we're just hitting those familiar beats in terms of like music and references and things like that, I could have seen this getting old rather quickly. But if they would have went through a different approach and really tried to make use of the 80s setting, I think it could have been rather interesting. But overall, I don't think it necessarily hurt it. I think it was more so, I think you used the word safe, and I think that is probably the biggest, I feel like I would say, strike in this, where you look at things.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving was so memorable because it scratched that itch that we wanted with an 80s slasher, and I think they did it so well that film's in our regular rotations, and a lot of people's regular rotation is, okay, that's what we had wanted out of something when we looked at Scream that had come out, and Halloween. And then you look at it in a Violent Nature, and they did a different approach. I know that doesn't work for everybody, but it was something that had an interesting creative stamp on it that wasn't necessarily just giving us another slasher flick. Whereas Hell of a Summer just plays it really safe. There's nothing breaking down any barriers, taking any real unique approaches. It is just kind of hitting those familiar beats, just kind of getting it out there. I think, in terms of directorial debut for Finn Wolfhard and Billy Brick, it's not bad at all. It just, they didn't really take any chances here.
Yeah, and I think, like, again, I always go back to, with these 80s movies, with these 80s camp slashers, there's so many weird, wild little films that didn't get the kind of reception that, some of us give them now as far as horror fans go, that I think they could have went back and really watched some of those things. Like, watch some of the sequels for, like, Sleepaway Camp. Watch some of the sequel, or, like, watch, like, Madman. Watch these kind of off the beaten path, kind of really underground kind of camp slashers, and really just see how wild some of these concepts get, just see how out there they get, and then go and write your script. Because I feel like this movie very much just feels like they watched a couple of, like, the Friday the 13th movies, and really probably the original Sleepaway Camp, and maybe some of, like, what would you say, Wet Hot American Summer.
Yeah.
In some aspects, like, the comedy is not as good as that, but it's like, you could tell, like, you could tell where the inspirations came from. It's like, if you guys just would have went and saw just how weird some of these movies get, I think we could have had a much more, like, engaging, interesting jump for, like, the kickoff of their directorial debut here. Because, like, I just think it's very safe. I don't think it's bad. Don't get me wrong. I'm being critical, but I'm not saying it's awful. It's just, we could have had something really special here. I just think that they really just wanted to make sure they could get the movie done, finished, and out without, like, disappointing, the studios or whatever. I just think, like, this movie didn't take enough risks, and I think that's going to hurt it in the long run as far as watchability goes. But if you are just someone looking for something that's, going to make you chuckle, going to have some of that nostalgia from just, like, the coming of age, you're a kid at summer camp, this will definitely give you that.
Yeah, and the cast of characters aren't bad either. Adequate performances, nothing that's really standouts, and I think some of the comedic delivery works well at times, but then sometimes it gets a little iffy, I think, and that could just be some of the writing as well, where some of the comedy does overstay its welcome. But overall, and I always have trouble with the comedy horrors, but it was never anything that it got too eye-rolly for me. So I never hit it as a strike. I knew what I was going in for Hell of a Summer. So, I think it was more easily digestible than typically a lot of comedy horrors are for me. And, I don't necessarily need something that's going to take a big risk, especially if it's going to be something that is just packed with quality, or just something that is rather interesting. And when you look at the film, you're going to see a lot of things that are reminiscent of other films, and maybe not done as well. You can tell that they're using that as a blueprint and kind of injected it into their story themselves. When we look in these slasher flicks, we're always kind of looking at that slasher design, and nothing knocks your socks off here. It just kind of is, a mask, and it's nothing that's memorable. It's just kind of, it seems like maybe they just picked it out and were like, okay, let's go with this one. Nothing that's going to be iconic. And when we get the backstory to what exactly is going on and why, it's safe. It's like, okay,
you've seen it before. It's not going to blow your mind.
Yep. It's just like, okay, yep. Wasn't expecting this, but not blown away by what we do get. So the best word for this film is safe.
This video is sponsored by our good friends over at Abracadabra NYC, your one-stop shop for all your horror needs and necessities. By following our link in the description, you can see all that they have to offer, from horror collectibles, costumes, accessories, magic masks, and so much more. And if you find yourself in the New York area, please stop by their physical location. They have 3 floors of everything you see in the store and a unique, memorable experience to go along with it. So whether you're looking for something creepy, cutesy, or just super cool, they've got you covered at Abracadabra NYC.
If it's something that you just want to turn on, have a decent time with, I think it'll be in and out of your rotation. It'll just be something you've watched and maybe forget that it exists until it pops up on streaming somewhere, and then maybe you'll turn it on while you're doing something around the house. So I don't think this is going to be something that will be in a lot of people's, top slasher tier films at all. So I think it's just going to be a one and done, and not really a lot of rewatchability, but you can turn it on and just passively watch it. So for me, I'm going to go worth a watch on this one. It's not a terrible film, just it doesn't really do too much.
Yeah, I'm going to follow it up with worth a watch as well on this one. It's exactly how Luke put it there. It's beautiful. I agree. It's, it's just a very safe film. And again, I don't want to beat it up too bad, because it's something where it's like, it's not awful. It's not offensive. It's not like they're not trying. It's just, I think that they liked the idea. It almost seems like they like the idea of doing a camp slasher comedy more so than actually coming up with anything very unique or different for the camp slasher comedy. It was just, we like these movies, we're going to make one of those movies. And nothing wrong with that. It's just when you're, again, looking for something, you're hoping for something like a Thanksgiving, or something like, even if they wanted to go as weird and strange as, In a Violent Nature. The big thing I can say, even though it is different, it is strange, and it's turning some people off for In a Violent Nature, Johnny is something that's a huge positive for everybody. And this movie doesn't have that. If it had a Johnny, I feel like we would have been in a much better spot. So that's where I sit with that. Definitely a couple worth of watches. Let us know down below if you guys have had a chance to see Hell of a Summer. Thanks you to the folks over at Neon for sending over a screener. We asked for one pretty late in the game, but they were able to accommodate. So thank you as always. And yeah, we got a lot of fun stuff coming up on the channel. We just talked about another movie, a little bit more underground, and I don't think many people have found it or will discover it yet, but I know this is going to be one that I'm going to start seeing on some lists as the months and years go on. But it's called, what is it? It's
Wake Up.
Wake Up. I almost said Watch Out. I'm like, what the hell am I saying? But yeah, Wake Up. Very good, very fun. Check out that review. Yes, seriously. But other than that, got a list video coming to you guys on Monday morning, the one you've been anticipating. So we'll have that there. And yeah, that's going to wrap it up for us, folks. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the horror shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, gonna smash your ass. Splattercast, gonna smash your ass. Splattercast, gonna smash your ass. Splattercast, gonna smash your ass.